Hello, good morning. Thank you for attending Black Hat. My name is Window Snyder, and I am a member of the Black Hat USA Review Board. Welcome to How to Secure Unique Ecosystem Shipping 1 Billion Plus Cores. It is my pleasure to introduce Adam Zabrocki, who is the Director of Offensive Security at NVIDIA, and Marco Mitic, System Software Manager at NVIDIA. So Adam is the Director of Offensive Security at NVIDIA and specializes in low-level security research. He created Linux Kernel Runtime Guard project, defended by OpenWall, and has worked at Microsoft European Organization for Nuclear Research, and has served as Vice Chair for the RISC-V Extension Group, and has developed key security extensions for RISC-V, including Pointer Masking and Control Flow Integrity, and is currently working on memory tagging. Marco Mitic is a software security architect and system software manager focused on secure system design and product security, and is currently managing NVIDIA's core RISC-V team. Please welcome Adam and Marco.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy and delighted to be in the Black Hat main stage, to be able to speak about such an important topic of how to secure and how actually NVIDIA secure our own unique ecosystem shipping more than billion cores. However, before we move forward, two sentences about ourselves. Are we even the right people to speak on such an important and difficult topic? So my name is Adam Zabrocki. I'm currently working at NVIDIA as Director of Offensive Security, where I lead various OSR offensive security research efforts across the company. And I'm also involved in the RISC-V International, when I'm serving as a vice chair of J Extension Group, and I'm author of various RISC-V CPU ISA extension, and I'm security architect for the GPU and next-gen NVIDIA product. While Marco Mitic, who is co-speaker today, he's a software security architect and system software manager who leads various NVIDIA course RISC-V teams. He's a manager there, and he's also GPU product security and risk officer and PSAT lead. So first thing first, why do we even have this topic? So NVIDIA currently is known from their data center product, and that's how they look like. They are a big platform. It's not a single product. It's an entire platform, and they mostly handle various very complicated workloads, especially AI workloads. However, that's not the only product we have. We also have a product who looks like this. You can actually take it and put to your own data center. You don't need to buy entire platform. You can just buy a specific device like this and can handle actually the same workload. You can also have specific AI workload run on that specific product. And then we also have traditional GPUs like this. It's also our line of the product. There is consumer market GPU and also data platform GPUs, which you can see on the right. It's not consumer GPU. Then we also have other products. We have system of the chip like Tegra. We have Jetson Nano. We have various Jetson Nanos. We have upcoming NVIDIA Digits, NVIDIA Spark. So as you can see, there is tons of the different type of the product, yes? They have different feature, they have completely different security model, they have completely different threat model, and they have completely different expectation, yes? However, what is important, even though they are completely different product, they still run on the one single ecosystem, which is NVIDIA processor. So the question is, how do we actually run such kind of one ecosystem in so many different products line would have different expectation and different security model. So there is nothing hidden under the sun. So we want to speak a little bit more about how this specific processor, we redesign this entire ecosystem to fulfill so many use cases and so many security demands with the completely different threat models. So first thing first, each of these NVIDIA product, this chipset which you saw in the previous picture, may include between 10 up to 50 microcontrollers. And we have different level microcontrollers. We have function level controllers, like memory controller, chip-to-chip interface. We have chip system level controller, like resource manager, PMU security. We also have data processing. And what is important, that those microcontrollers were running on the Falcon in the past. This is internal proprietary RISC-V ISA. However, the demand of the grow and the trajectory of the grow and adaptability of NVIDIA product went so much far ahead that it was very, very difficult to scale such kind of grow on the legacy Falcon architecture. Because of this problem, it was sufficient at the time when we designed and used that. But however, the grow and adaptability demand changed so much, our requirements changed, our expectation changed, our threat model changed. So we needed to redesign that. We also needed to update security layer to fulfill not only modern expectation, but we expect to grow even further. So we also need to secure future expectations. Yes, and actually, NVIDIA chip must meet the demand which we have, which customers have, and which everybody expects to have together with the growth which we have. It's not only workloads for AI booming, every workloads are booming, and NVIDIA processor is actually a crucial piece of those. So we had an opportunity to actually redesign entire ecosystem from the scratch. And we wanted to do it in the secure manner, and which is also will be scalable in the future in the way which we don't even know how. And we choose to do it on the RISC-V, and Marco will speak why.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. So let me continue with answering why did we choose RISC-V. So first, we wanted to retire our proprietary Falcon architecture and move towards an open and more future-proof foundation. The RISC-V offered better baseline performance without legacy overhead, and its flexibility enabled us rapid hardware-software co-design through custom extensions. But the layered security isolation primitives were the key factor here. So what we wanted is to build a strong isolation model, strong as physically separate controllers. Essentially, we do not want to keep adding new standalone cores whenever we needed stronger security for something. So we wanted a common configurable platform across all microcontrollers for all products. And such a platform would need to be scalable, both up and out, such that we only pay for what's needed whenever we needed it. And this just shows the rate of adoption of RISC-V at NVIDIA. And naturally, with more applications we run on controllers, number of cores were also increasing. So we introduced RISC-V first in Turing architecture, and then focus was on migrating from Falcon, investing in security hardening and performance and scaling. I want to mention here that we do have RISC-V in all NVIDIA products, but I just listed GPU architectures for simplicity. So there are many aspects to forming a secure execution, and this list is by no means an exhaustive one, but I just listed some items that our talk will be touching on today. Now let's quickly go over some RISC-V basics as it's needed to follow what comes next. So most commonly, RISC-V has 3 privilege modes: machine mode, supervisor mode, and user mode, and HS mode if hypervisor extension is present. And each of the privilege modes has its own set of CSR registers, and there are multiple access control primitives that are configurable per privilege level. PMP and IOPMP are the most fundamental isolation units. So PMP would be, PMP restricts code running at different privilege levels from accessing certain memory regions. And IOPMP is pretty much the same thing, just for peripheral devices. So it restricts devices like crypto or DMA to access certain memory ranges. And from processor's perspective, IOPMP is used to restrict access to devices' control registers. And NVMPU here is NVIDIA's memory protection unit. It's NVIDIA extension. This is what enables, creates tasks if operating system is present. And apart from memory protection, it also does virtual to physical translation, address translation. So NVRISC-V would be NVIDIA's implementation of the RISC-V ISA. It is highly configurable, and it has several NVIDIA custom extensions. I only listed the NVIDIA's security extensions here, and I believe we'll cover most of them throughout this talk. And Peregrine is our hardware subsystem that includes NVRISC-V processor and peripheral devices. Within Peregrine, there may be multiple RISC-V and RISC-V cores, and the RISC-V extensions may or may not be present. We also have certain configurability within the peripherals as well. And depending on what the controller does, some cores may be in DCLS mode for safety and security. So internally, we describe this Peregrine ecosystem as one core strategy, essentially having one foundational hardware-software architecture for all microcontrollers across all products. This way, investments we make in the foundational, this way everything benefits from investments we make in the foundational elements. So in a given controller, execution would start with embedded in immutable boot ROM, or boot plugin if boot ROM is not present. And then we have this separation kernel software that creates and manages these isolated execution environments we call partitions. And this is where application software runs. This is where all the use cases are implemented. And this multi-partition architecture is our foundation for running mixed criticality applications on a single NVRISC-V controller. And at the same time, this is also foundation for our GPU software security. So because majority of software runs within partitions, it's very important to secure that environment. And this is what Adam will talk about next. And I'll come back to dive deeper in the core software architecture.
Thanks, Marco. So actually, as Marco mentioned, Peregrine ecosystem, there is much more than RISC-V, yes? There is so many other components on the top of the RISC-V. But what is important that we choose to build everything on the RISC-V. RISC-V is the foundation of our ecosystem. So there is some caveats that you need to take into account when you build everything on the RISC-V. And don't take me wrong, it's great for the innovation. It's open source, it's flexible, they give you a lot of opportunities, but despite of their undeniable advantages, there are some drawbacks that you need to take into account. First thing first, fragmentation. So because it's so open, you don't know what hardware implements, what extension you have, what you don't. How the software can be secure or running on the hardware which we don't know which capability they have. So that's why we have some remediation on the RISC-V. It's called profiles, which is maintained by the RISC-V Foundation, which mandate that specific RISC-V hardware, which is compatible with specific profile, must include specific extension or not. Or some of them can be optional. Also, the time when we choose the RISC-V to be able to do entire work, RISC-V ecosystem from the software perspective was not mature enough comparing to other ISA. If you compare to x86 or ARM, there was completely different place when the RISC-V was. So there is some remediation by the RISC-V dev partners trying to fulfill this gap. There is also when you work on the new extension, there is mandatory now to also provide the software implementation for those. And also, you know, RISC-V is booming. It's becoming more popular, so open source community also bring the support for the software ecosystem. However, speaking about the profiles, they address fragmentation, but they may still not be mutually exclusive, mutually compatible. For example, RVA profile is not compatible with RVB. They have different optional and different mandatory extension. Also, RVA profile, the main thing of RVA to be always backward compatible, and they do great job doing that. However, there is still some caveats. For example, RVA 22 make vector extension as optional extension, while RVA 23 make vector extension as mandatory. So there is still some little bit of caveats there as well. Also, when you're speaking about the custom extension, they might be actually costly, yes? Because you want to solve the problem which you have, nobody else solve it, so let's create on custom extension, you do it, but then you must do every heavy weightlifting for you. So please contribute to RISC-V, because at some point, someone else might hit the same problem when you, and they will work with the RISC-V to make extension which is officially ratified one. And then your extension might be not compatible with the RISC-V extension one, yes? So please contribute to RISC-V. Moreover, the new extension may solve the same problem in the better or maybe not way, and you will be stuck with your extension. So contribute to RISC-V. Also, your custom hardware means custom software. Who is going to write the software for your custom hardware? So you must take this into account when you do and go to this path. And again, when we speak about the Peregrine is much more than RISC-V. There is so many other coprocessors, there is so many other components, yes? However, the NV RISC-V is still the core execution environment. So how do we secure that? How do we make sure it's run as best as they can? So first thing first, we want to learn from the past. We don't want to repeat some mistakes. So we, for example, consciously did not implement ASLR, because we believe that in our ecosystem, it has limited value, but it still costs resources. It still costs something which is not cheap. So instead of implementing ASLR, which brings to our specific ecosystem a limited value, we decided to use these resources to implement on something much more productive that we know it's much have stronger security attributes. Moreover, Peregrine is not one specific component. As I mentioned at the beginning, we might have up to 50 Peregrines in one die. Some Peregrines have different trust level, some have different threat model, some can be trusted, some they cannot, some of them can be looked as a danger component. We need to take this into account. So at first, even though all of these things which I mentioned is the hardware, still the majority of the problem are in the software. Software is the biggest attack surface. So how do you effectively find the software vulnerabilities, especially in the ecosystem like that? So we do have NVIDIA Offensive Security Research, who, among other things, also do manual vulnerability research. But this is something which we must have. Everybody must have, but it's not sufficient, neither scalable solution. We need to invest in automatic vulnerability detection, because this is a crucial piece. How do you do that? Fuzzing is an answer, because it can help. However, how to increase the effectiveness of the fuzzer? We have address sanitizers, we have code coverage instrumentation that can help. However, there's one caveat. At the time when we've done that, RISC-V did not support anything of those. There's no address sanitizer at the time. So what did we do? We actually did proactive approach. We changed compiler by ourselves to be able to bring support for address sanitizer to the RISC-V. Over the time, also community picked this up, and also today you have address sanitizer on the RISC-V. Moreover, when we're starting to do that, we're starting to use it, we realize it's still not enough. In our ecosystem, it's not performed well enough to uncover as much bugs as we wanted to, so we needed to invest in some hardware accelerator. So we wanted to have hardware ASAN. Again, RISC-V did not have hardware ASAN. So we developed own custom extension called Pointer Masking, which aimed to add hardware ASAN and later memory tagging to our RISC-V ecosystem. But however, we have unusual use case. Instead of only having S and U mode, we also wanted to support M mode. We wanted to support bare metal mode. We wanted to support with and without OS layer. So we developed the custom extension. I developed it, and I brought it to the RISC-V International, to the TE group, which was rebranded to Runtime Integrity. And when I've done that, I realized that also people from Google independently working on own version of pointer masking, because they're starting to meet the same problem that we've done. So instead of fighting between ourselves, we decided to unite our use case and promote one single standard for everyone. And that's how the RISC-V pointer masking extension was created, because they are purposed to serve as a framework for any feature who requires masking the pointers. And there is various use cases, like hardware ASAN, like memory tagging, like pointer authentication, like hardware memory sandbox, which is visualized on the right side of the corner, who allows you to implement in-process memory sandbox. However, over the ratification process, we simplified use case to only hardware ASAN and be able to integrate with the RISC-V ISA caveats as many possible ways as possible to be able to achieve the ability to serve as a framework, and we achieved that. Today, RISC-V is not just a single extension, it's a framework for every extension who requires masking the pointers. And we support 2 modes in the pointer masking. You can mask up to 7 bits or up to 16 bits, you can choose. And we also independently worked with the RISC-V International to make sure that pointer masking is included in profiles, to be mandatory to some profiles and optional to other profiles, so everybody can benefit. And in short, we spent more than 4 years of working on the pointer masking extension. It's umbrella for 5 different extensions. There is extension speed per privilege level, and we also created 2 virtual extensions, actually, who have no bearing in the hardware. It just mandates that you have support of pointer masking in the U mode or S mode, and there is some mechanism allowing you to do that. And this is part of the official standard. And we also brought software ecosystem, which is listed there. And we additionally, because when we've done that, we actually finally can get this inside of NVIDIA software ecosystem. And today, we actually fuzzing, as of today, GSP firmware with the hardware ASAN. We're fuzzing resource manager with the hardware ASAN. And we are preparing for the bare metal fuzzing microcode, and we are preparing for the RTOS fuzzing as well. There's more in progress. And there's more people involved in the RISC-V pointer masking. It was a huge effort, so kudos to everybody who's listed there. Another extension which we believe made sense, it's actually hardware control flow integrity. It's not software, it's a hardware control flow integrity who tries to protect against the code reuse attack, return to libc, ROP, job, all of those attacks. I'm not going to explain that because it's a black hat, so everybody knows that, yes? So actually, CFI, it's an umbrella for two other sub-extensions. There is control flow integrity shadow stack, who enforces backward edge control flow integrity, who creates actually a new shadow region, which you can see here on the slide on the right. It also introduces new register, like shadow stack pointer, and also new instruction for shadow stack management. It also preserved the original stack ABI. So before we return from the function, we compare if the return address from the shadow stack, who nobody has access to excluding the hardware, and the software normal shadow stack, they matching or not. If not, we erase the hardware extension by the hardware, not by the software. And because of this, we can detect any corruption. And we also believe that because shadow stack is so effective, we can remove the stack cookies protection and replace them with the shadow stack because it's more effective. As a result, the code size will not grow because we just ditch one mitigation with another. And second sub-extension, it's actually control flow integrity landing pads, which enforce forward edge control flow integrity, while the shadow stack is a backward edge control flow integrity. And every indirect branch must always landing in the landing pad instruction. It's a new instruction who has also encoded the 20 bits encoded label. And whenever you do have enforced landing pads, actually any indirect branch must always end up in the specific landing pad instruction, which specific hash, which is different than some other architectures. Because of those, it allows us to actually implement fine grain, not only coarse grain, but also fine grain control flow integrity. Moreover, we have 20 bits of label, which is better than any other architecture with the label, because we can remove the probability of the hash collision. And we also work with the CFI, with the RISC-V International, to be able to include CFI in the profiles, and we managed to do that. Some of them are optional, some of them are mandatory. We also brought the software ecosystem to support those, and we also adding software support for the CFI. We actually, in NVIDIA, are committed to bring CFI, hardware CFI support for the hardware and the software on the Rubin chips, which is GR200X. So again, contributors, there's more than us, so there's many people there, especially kudos for the Giorgio and Ved, who were chair and co-chair of this working group on the RISC-V. And what's next? What do you want to do? Actually, you want to also work on the memory tagging, yes? Because that's something which you wanted from the beginning with. That's what was the story behind the pointer masking, yes? Why? Because it addresses the performance issue of the hardware ASIN as well. Hardware ASIN, it's a great thing, but it's still some performance issues on other angles. Additionally, it can be enabled in the production, not only for the testing, and we want to have this on the production. We actually contributing to the memory tagging, and we released the beta spec version of the RISC-V memory tagging just 2 months ago. And again, NVIDIA RISC-V ecosystem in the software and in the hardware will have this support when it's ratified. In short, how does it work? Very quickly, we do allocate new memory, and whenever you do any new memory allocation, we also allocate the tag or the color associated to this allocation in the pointer. Independently, completely independently, we allocate another tag, another color in the memory. However, those two tags, those two pointers, keep the same value. Whenever we reference the memory, outside or whenever we reference the memory, we compare the tag from the pointer, which is used to reference, and the tag from the memory where we do reference. If the tag matches, we allow this access. If not, we raise the hardware exception. So we can detect the bug before they actually appear. It's a different way of mitigating the software. It's not post-corruption, it's pre-corruption. That's why it's so effective. And also we can detect other type of debug, like use after free, use after return. All of those is detectable by the hardware. Another sub-extension which we're working on, it's actually extending the shadow stack, because landing pads, it's defined in any mode, including M mode. But shadow stack is not defined in the M mode, yes? So we want to extend the CFI to also protect the M mode for the critical microcode protection. And another interesting extension which we are looking at, it's actually hardware fault isolation. During the pointer masking ratification, we remove in-process memory sandbox. We want that. So there's no TG yet, but we are evaluating benefits of bringing the hardware fault isolation HFI sandbox to our software ecosystems, because it's very beneficial for us. And in short, HFI introduced a user mode concept of the memory region, something similar to x86 segments. So you can predefine the regions whenever you start the application with their base length and attributes, security attributes as well. And whenever you enter the region to execute, for example, untrusted code in this region will be protected by the hardware that you won't be able to reference or even see any memory outside of the predefined region. And this is enforced by the hardware. So you have perfect sandbox. And also there is additional areas of interest which we are investing in. We have post-quantum cryptography, we have side channel protection, we have Cherry, we can speak more about this later, and we have enhanced hardware fault injection protection. However, what I spoke about, it's a RISC-V core ecosystem in the hardware. What about the software? That's what Marco will speak about more.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, now let's go over core software layers that form this foundation. So our multi-partition design draws inspiration from multiple independent levels of security and safety, or MILS architecture, that's common in high assurance systems like in defense and avionics industries. So again, partitions are isolated execution environments that are defined by manifest and partition policies. And these are signed static configuration sets that hold fine-grained configuration for hardware access control primitives we have. So first, Bootrom parses manifest, and then it configures the hardware such that it limits capabilities and maximum privilege for the rest of the software that comes on that core. And then we have Separation Kernel, which parses partition policies, further configures hardware, and thereby defines a partition. What's important to note here is that manifest and policies are signed separately from partition images, so no change within partition software would affect policy configuration. At any given time, only one partition is active per core, and all the information flow in and out partitions is access controlled in policies. As I said, the separation kernel is that software component that creates and manages partitions. It is not a hypervisor. It only controls what hardware is exposed to partitions. It does not abstract any hardware, nor it provides any high-level functionalities to partition software. So partition software has direct access to hardware. On a partition switch, separation kernel would clear out previous partition state, parse the target partition policy, reconfigures the hardware, and then transfer execution to the target partition. From scheduling perspective, from separation kernel's perspective, scheduling is simple and cooperative, but different scheduling policies can be built on top. And there are mechanisms to, let's say, preempt a partition that's stuck, and then separation kernel will transfer execution to a predefined fallback partition. The kernel is small in size. It is written in Ada Spark programming language, and it is formally verified to be free of runtime errors. Now, before separation kernel, we have Bootrom, which is immutable, embedded in hardware, and also written in Spark. Because of its nature and importance, we added several specific extensions to further secure its execution. The ROM protection here means that the ROM is split into sections, such that after each phase of Bootrom execution, hardware will disable the previous section. So even if you somehow manage to get the core to jump back, it won't work. And we have execute-only memory, so the code cannot be dumped out. All functions are leaf functions, so there is no return address spill on stack. And during the core software execution, the core is in lockdown state, so all external access is disabled. Now, we do have multiple hardware glitch attack protections, but what I added here is a reference to Adam's DEF CON talk where they go in detail of a flaw they found in RISC-V ISA itself that makes glitch attacks more successful. So look into that if you're interested. I said before that depending on what microcontroller does, some cores may be in DCLS mode, which means there is another core that's in lockstep with the main core, just delayed few cycles. So if there's a mismatch in execution, it means something off is going on, and it will be detected. This is added for safety, but it's also, for example, it makes glitch attacks harder. OK, now let's talk about language-based security. As I mentioned Spark multiple times now. So traditionally, we rely on tests to show programs' correctness, or to point that there is a security vulnerability somewhere in the code. And this is good, but there is no guarantee that you won't have, let's say, a single overflow somewhere in the large C code base, for example. But with Spark, we can prove that whole classes of bugs will not ever happen. And we do that through contract-based programming and due to the fact that Spark is a very strict subset of Ada language with formally defined specification. So here I have a very simple procedure with pre- and post-condition contracts, and this would be an implementation. So with Spark, we can prove that this implementation is correct given the contracts. And that's done through this high-level pipeline that involves multiple steps and some fancy tools like SMT solvers. But the beauty with Spark nowadays and the tools that we have to work with Spark is that we can abstract all that complexity with proving away such that we use Spark and its tools to get to a formally verified implementation without knowing the intrinsics of the SMT solvers or underlying mathematics of it. So in reality, the pipeline would look more like this. The complexity with proving is, let's say, hidden under this tool called gnat-prove. So you would use that tool through this iterative process, and let's say if some property cannot be proven, gnat-prove would give you counterexamples of why something does not hold. And then you would go back, you would change the specification, implementation, or even the contracts, and do it again. Now, again, in reality, most likely that you'll have that you won't be able to do everything you want in just Spark, 100% Spark code, in which case you would make calls into C, ADA, or assembly. What you do then, you would wrap that call with Spark code, and you would test for what you cannot prove. Essentially, you would manually test for the post conditions to make sure that they hold. And ideally, these occurrences are small so that there are no side effects. So you should manually verify that there are no side effects. OK, so maybe you're asking now, why can't I do this with C, ADA, or Rust? And what follows is my modified section of a talk I saw once that I really liked. And then I use this to explain the fundamental difference in why Spark allows us to do this formal verification. So let's say this is a finite state of machine state set of a given machine. So all possible combinations of memory registers, everything. And this would be a subset that's attainable through a programming language. And then the green box would be machine state set that fall under correct execution of your program, so the thing that you're building, that you want to build. And C, as the most powerful language, tends to extend its state set that it can attain, while other languages like Ada or Rust are more strict, so they have a reduced state set. But Spark language is actually a very, very strict subset of Ada programming language with no ambiguities. There is no undefined behavior with Spark, as it has formally defined specification. And this is the main reason why you can rely on it, use the tools I mentioned, and get to a formally verified implementation for something. Now, again, in reality, you would need to use these escapes, as I call them, into non-Spark world and make calls to C, ADA, or assembly, in which case you would fall back to testing and manual verification. Of course, the main point here is to minimize usage of those and to keep them very small. Otherwise, this is an obvious target to look into. But in general, if you can get to if most of your software is in Spark, or let's say you have some subcomponents that are 100% in Spark, having a guarantee that there won't be any runtime exceptions for any given input at any time is very valuable for both security and reliability. Coming back to the architecture diagram, so partitions, multi-partition architecture is our foundation for running mixed criticality applications on a single microcontroller. And partitions are isolated using hardware primitives that are only managed by core software that is formally verified to be free of runtime errors. And AORTE, or absence of runtime errors, is a common term used for this. Now, there are some attack vectors that you usually cannot defend against just by language, and side channels would be obvious ones. So we designed and configured our hardware such that we mitigate against those. Although theoretically, it is possible to model all the hardware, the branch predictors, the caches, everything in software, and then somehow prove that you're mitigating against those in software. But this is extremely complex, and much more practical approach would be to combine software techniques with proper hardware configuration to mitigate against these. Now, I was thinking about top 5 takeaways for all this journey of ours, and I think if you get a chance to build something from scratch or redesign something, first you should start thinking holistically and start a design from both bottom-up and top-down at the same time. Things like confidential compute and virtualization introduced requirements that we had to consider from the very beginning when we started building this foundation. I do understand that not everyone is in a position to do hardware-software co-design, but when building a large ecosystem, hardware-software co-design is a must. Being just different does not imply innovation, and standards are good, so it does pay off when standards are followed, so innovate when you must. And we saw how memory safety is a hardware problem as well. But ultimately, there are no silver bullets in security, and defense in depth remains the most reliable guiding principle. And now over to Adam, and he's going to close with some lessons learned.
Thanks, Marco. So actually, what did we learn? First thing first, that hardware extensions are actually not enough. Yes, we also have software, because the software is actually today the biggest attack surface. So you cannot solve the problem either only in the hardware or only in the software. You must co-design hardware together with the software to create a secure ecosystem, yes? And some extensions help you doing that. Like we discussed, memory tagging, HFI, pointer masking, all of those are great and they help. However, they are not enough because software can still misbehave in the boundary of the hardware. Hardware put the boundaries, but software inside can still misbehave, and there is some room for the playground. Also, formally verified language like ADA or Spark, or memory-safe language like Rust are great. They have significant security, return of investment, ROI. They are very, very good, yes? However, they are not cheap, yes? And also, because of those, it's like we are going to live in the hybrid world. Can we afford to write the software, every single software in the memory-safe language? It's very expensive, so probably not. Are we going to use only the software that we develop by ourselves? No, we must also rely on the third-party libraries. And maybe the third-party library are not going to rewrite in the memory-safe language or formally proven language. So we are going to live in the hybrid software world probably for a while. We need to take this into account. That's why hardware extension can help limiting the abilities for those software. Also, non-memory safety vulnerabilities still exist. Memory safety is not the only problem which we have, yes? We have design issues, race condition issues, all of those are still there. And we actually create a presentation about the real-world bugs which we found during OSR reviews in the formally verified language. They can still have bugs. And there's a great presentation which I've done with Alex together. I recommend to watch. Additionally, I think that's the most important point from the entire presentation. So when you create innovative ecosystem, you must be able to have some kind of forward-thinking mindset because you do not know where you go. You do not know how your system are going to be evolved. But what you do know you must be flexible. You must be flexible enough to allow you adaptation of your ecosystem to the new threats. You don't even know which will be. You need to be able to be flexible enough to change the hardware in the way when it will be demanded to be changed. You need to have an ability to change the software as well. You need to change the entire ecosystem. And so you must design something which is flexible enough from the beginning that will allow this evolution to the stuff which you don't know what it is in the future. Also, something which is not a problem today might be a very critical problem tomorrow. Examples of the side channel attacks, Spectre meltdown. People did not think it's a problem in the past. Now it's one of the most difficult problems to solve. We need to be able to be flexible enough to answer to those demands which you have to protect from such attacks. Also, it helps, you must be able to make some kind of sometimes informed prediction where the industry can go. How do you do that? Be part of the various organizations, be part of the various groups of working groups, because you can see where the industry is going to, predict some kind of formal decision. Even if the answer is not always obvious, sometimes you can read it from the air, from the discussion of the people from the same industry, yes? Also, scalability, flexibility, performance, reliability, security must be taken collectively, not separately. It's tempted to be able to optimize, for example, reliability and kill some kind of reliability or kill some kind of room for the changes in other of these groups of the efforts. But no, you need to take everything collectively if you want to be flexible enough. And we also believe that hybrid attacks, not just pure software, not just pure hardware, but hybrid attacks are going to be rising. And we already see the trends like that, like raw hammer, speculative execution. It's not pure hardware, not pure software. It's a hybrid attack. Also, the ISA bugs which on the RISC-V, which Marco referenced, it's also a hybrid attack. And we believe it's going to be on the rise. So we need to be able to protect from those two. So that's it what we have. If you have any questions, we are happy to answer. But I don't think we have too much time, but I think there is some still room for left. And thanks.